Good afternoon and welcome to everybody. My name is Dorian Marina. I will be your moderator for this afternoon's panel. This is the panel for Writing Far, Writing Home, the first section. I will just give a brief overview to intro us into the topic, and then I will introduce you to our wonderful speakers that I am also very much looking forward to hearing from. Filipinos in Europe speak of their varied writing experiences with narratives about and from the home country, with or without nostalgia. Does the distance make them more objective? Does it make them more critical from a point of love? And to address this topic, I would like to introduce you to our three panelists, our three writers and artists. Marga Ortigas is a veteran. Yes, please. Let's welcome. She is a veteran international journalist and best-selling author from Manila. After decades of reporting from the front lines of conflict and climate change for CNN and Al Jazeera, she stepped away from the camera and focused on the page. With her first 4 books published by Penguin Random House Southeast Asia, she was a British Council Chevening Scholar and was awarded by the International Committee of the Red Cross for Humanitarian Reporting on the Philippines. A storyteller at heart, Marga continues to write both nonfiction and fiction with the urgency of a journalist and the intimacy of a poet. And Marga will be joined by Maya Butalid. Maya was a former student of UP Diliman. Maya Butalid balances Filipino identity with her life in the Netherlands while supporting Philippine development. Her first book, Chasing Windmills, was first published in 2022 by a publisher in London, UK. This was later published in the Philippines by 8 Letters Bookstore and publishing in 2024. Maya Butalid is one of the co-editors of Diaspora Journey, Philippine Migration and Diaspora Narratives, an anthology of personal narratives, a collection that weaves together the diverse tales of Filipino migrants. And our final writer joining us is Deepa Paul, just to my left. Born to Filipino and Indian parents in Manila, the Philippines, Deepa Paul is the author of the memoir Ask Me How It Works, Love in an Open Marriage, published by Viking Books UK in 2025 and translated into Dutch, German, and soon into Albanian. Gillian Anderson has described Deepa's memoir as stunningly vulnerable and poetic. If this doesn't change your perspective on relationships, nothing will. Previously, Deepa was a copywriter for GMA7, the Philippines' largest TV network, and for global entertainment brands such as NBC, Universal, the Disney Channel, HBO, and Netflix. She lives in Amsterdam with her husband, daughter, and cranky black cat. And to begin our conversation, I would like to invite Marga to begin.
Good evening. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. We hope you've enjoyed the events that have been put up by the Philippine delegation, and we are very, very happy to be here. First slide, please. Okay, home is where the heart is. Home is in the heart is what I'm going to talk about right now. The next slide, please. When I wrote my first novel, which is called The House on Calle Sombra, and you'll see it over there, I hadn't put a slide up of it, but it's a love letter, although some might say it isn't quite as much love as perhaps a little bit of hate and anxiety, for the Philippines. It's a family saga set in a fictionalized Christian island nation in the middle of the Pacific. And I wrote a lot of it when I was actually away, when I was living in the States and I was in the UK and I was traveling through Europe, and a lot of the book came together like that in bits and pieces over 5 years. But it wasn't so much that I was away from home that allowed me to write it, because I think all form of writing, in a way, is having to step back from the realities we're living. So I think all writers, in a sense, in that are long-distance writers, because you need to step back to be able to reflect, to be able to think, to be able to observe. Now, that goes into not just fiction writing, but also nonfiction. Before coming out with these fictional books, I was a journalist on TV for close to 3 decades. I worked for CNN and Al Jazeera and traveled the world because of those networks. But the writing that I did for news also followed that same path, which is that I had to take a step back to be able to digest things and basically put them on the air for you. Because if you don't take a step back, if you don't observe, if you don't stand back to witness and examine things, then you're a little too caught up and are not able to put things into words. Writing in itself is having to reflect, is having to digest everything that you see around you. Next slide, please. Now, to talk a little bit more about how one might do that with news, what I would do is everywhere I went, everybody I spoke to, all the interviews I did, not just was a cameraman recording it, but I was taking copious notes. I always had a little notepad with me, and I took different types of notes from what the cameraman might have recorded on camera. So I would notice like, oh, her hands are shaking. She seems afraid or hiding something. Or whatever it was, the textures all around me that I saw, I put into this notebook. So when I then had to write the report that you saw on air, all those notes I would push aside. So it was the mere exercise of writing them down that allowed me to take it all in. And then I put it aside, and whatever I remembered is what you saw on the air. Because it's what you remember that is then the most important, that is then the most vital. Now, obviously, I took that journalist's discipline and I did the same thing for my fictional writing. So the 5 years that it took to write that book is because I had copious notes and a lot of memories that I had to go through and self-analyze, I suppose, to do with the Philippines that went into that fictional book. And the book in itself is written in a nostalgic manner, as taking a step back, not just from place, but from time. So although the elements in that book are very current, I made it a point to make it seem to you as if it happened 20 years ago. I played around with history because in a sense, I think when we feel something is far away or when we're looking at something with nostalgia, it makes it easier to accept the most bitter of truths. You might romanticize it a little bit. You might give it a little bit of a rose tint, but no matter how ugly it is, if you put that step back, it is easier to imbibe. Or at least that has been my experience. Next slide, please. But there are fundamental truths that we all try to capture in our writing. And these are truths that really, through time, change because they're fluid. Our ideas about family, about society, even our own identity, the things that we long for, even our memories are fluid. They change because we cannot pin down time. And so what do? We write because that's really all we have. In that process of writing, we are trying to remember who we are, what we are, and what it is we long for. And again, like I said, through time, those things change. But the words try to pin them down for us, at least for a little while. But even the things that we write, if we go back to them years later, like the book, I've read that book again several times. It's going through a Spanish translation right now. It will be out next year. I've just reread it again after 2-3 years, and it hits me differently. And they're my own words. And yet, having taken a step back, they feel foreign even to me. So I'm reading it differently. I'm sure that has been probably, right, your experience as well. Next slide, please. And so at the end of the day, I think all writers are answering one fundamental question, which is we're all longing for home or a concept of home, what it is to feel like we belong or to bridge that distance between what we are looking at and who we are, or what it is we long for. So beyond a place or the 4 walls that might have contained you when you were growing up, for me, home has become a feeling where you feel like you belong. And that's not just a city or a country, but for somebody like me, for example, who has had to live out of a suitcase for many, many years. In fact, there was a time where I hadn't been in my home base for longer than 2 weeks in an entire year. I would wake up on certain days and not know which country I was in, which is very difficult when you're trying to do the news and then you have to get up and report on something you're not aware of where you're at. But once you make your peace with the fact that you have to belong to yourself and that your memories are always constantly being rewritten, then you realize that the whole process of writing, the whole exercise of writing is reimagining who we are constantly. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that in itself is the magic of living. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marga. Our next speaker will be Maya. Maya.
Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. For this session, I would like to talk about my second book, The Heart of a Mother. It is a simple, short book. It is a collection of short stories of mothers I have met throughout the years, inspired by their stories. And cutting across cultures, beliefs, social economic status, and generations. As a Filipino migrant who is also rooted in my second home, the Netherlands, in this regard, I am privileged to see and experience various perspectives. So I try to capture these perspectives in the short stories of mothers. So, for example, I wrote about a Syrian refugee mother who had to deal with a huge drop in her social standing, because she comes from a prominent family with a good career in Syria, and now she had to leave their family under social welfare. So she really struggled a lot with that. I wrote also about a Moroccan mother. There was an old colleague of mine who actually practically grew up in the Netherlands, just as Dutch people do. And she has two young adult children, but still she experienced discrimination and racism, and especially after 9/11. And this had really a tremendous impact on her and her children. So I also wrote about a Turkish migrant mother who could not speak the language, but when her son started to go to school, she was confronted with, how can I support my son in his education? And that pushed her to learn the Dutch language. And actually, after years, she even developed a career of her own by doing such. I wrote about a single mom, a working mom, also a Filipina mother who had to endure being separated from her child just to provide a safe and secure place for both of them and their child, being a victim of domestic violence. So I wrote about these stories, and these are unique stories of mothers I have met throughout the years, but there is something universal about them, and that is the heart of the mother. So a mother I saw you could not really put in a box, a working mom is not better than a stay-at-home mom, or, they follow stubbornly their heart. So in my stories, I tried to blend personal, that is a storytelling, so it's not a novel or a short novel. It's a storytelling type of writing, blending the personal with the universal. And I would say that I am very privileged, and I would say I celebrate being a Filipino migrant and Filipino diaspora, because I am privileged to see the world broader, a broader world with various perspectives. Because as a Filipino diaspora, or diaspora for that matter, we are daily, constantly confronted with a different culture, different norms, traditions, and we have to constantly discern for ourselves which of these should I take on board, which should I not. And that's why there's something special about being a migrant. And with this little book, I would actually like to share that kind of perspective, that positive, to celebrate that, because it is a gift also. because usually as migrants we feel so, pity ourselves. We have to struggle with discrimination, racism, but there is a strength in us, and we have something which we only have because we are given this bigger world to see. Yeah, that's my story.
Thank you very much, Maya Butalid. And our final speaker will be Deepa Paul.
Magandang hapon, guten Tag. Can we have the first slide, please? One might speak about writing from home through two lenses: the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia or the sharp eagle eyes of criticism. But what if there was a third? I think there's always more than two options. And so for me, that third lens is curiosity. My name is Deepa, and I write about my journey from Manila to Amsterdam, from monogamy to ethical non-monogamy, in a memoir called Ask Me How It Works, Love in an Open Marriage. In each chapter, I answer the questions I'm most often asked when I tell people I'm in an open marriage, from who thought of it first, to are you ever jealous, to what happens if you fall in love. So curiosity is actually one of the traits I most value in myself, admire in others, and seek to encourage in as many people as I can. Next slide, please. Moving to Amsterdam with my Filipino husband as a newlywed, age 30, I saw a multitude of ways that people approached committed relationships. For the first time in my life, I met same-sex couples, couples in open marriages, 60-year-old swingers having a great time, couples who had been married for 35 years but lived in two houses on opposite ends of the street, divorcees dating again in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. I saw a freedom, non-judgmental openness, and a respect for individuality I had never seen before. Coming from a country where divorce remains illegal, where marriage between a man and a woman is the only legally, societally, and morally valid form of commitment, where young Catholic schoolgirls, like I once was, are taught the virtues of obedience, simplicity, and modesty, but never the truth that our bodies are our own, of sex beyond sinfulness, or that the concept of consent even existed. I was fascinated. Away from everything I had ever known, with no one to withhold or grant permission, to shame, blame, or judge, free from the pressure to conform and do the same thing as everyone else, I found the space to take my beliefs out of their rigid constraints and hold them up to the light of a completely different cultural context. Kind of like unpacking an overstuffed suitcase and shaking out the wrinkles. For the first time in my life, I looked at the rules of the world as I knew it, and I began to ask questions. Where did I learn to think this? Who taught me that? Who benefits from me having to believe in this? Why do I continue to believe this? I got curious about my beliefs about love and commitment. I had been taught growing up that longevity was the sole measure of a relationship's health or success. Everything, as a young girl growing up in the Philippines, for me, there was only one goal: marriageability. Life is made for a unit of two, and marriage is for life. Anything shorter than forever brands you a failure. There was only one picture of a happy marriage and a happy family. If anything lay under the surface, it was better not to speak of it. There was only one way for a woman to be recognized as a wife and a mother, and only one way for a wife and a mother to exist: as selfless, sacrificial, and silent. I began to wonder why the unspoken rules of secrecy and sacrifice, mostly on the part of the wives, seemed to underpin an institution that was very different on its public face than what it was in private, and why we could never, ever talk about it. My curiosity whispered to me, what if there was another way? Is there more? Is it worth it? I got curious about sex, my body, and desire. I'd been taught that only bad women wanted sex and enjoyed it, and good, decent women didn't. I'd been taught that my body was the property of my husband, and my worth and dignity as a human being rested in its purity. I'd been taught that desire was a dangerous animal, which left to run rampant would destroy me and tear my marriage apart. My curiosity whispered again, is that really true? What if it isn't? What if I could stand for my own needs and desires and still be good? Doubt can be a destabilizing feeling, but when we allow ourselves to re-examine our beliefs, we make room for curiosity, for imagination. We grant ourselves the permission to ask, what else is possible? What more is possible? What me is possible? Next slide, please. Curiosity works the other way around too. I sometimes ask myself whether the reason I thrive in complexities of multiple relationships with a husband of 17 years, a daughter of 12, a boyfriend of 6 years, and occasionally dating both men and women from time to time, when I have the time, is because I grew up working 2 jobs in a city of 21 million people with huge extended families and the attendant family politics, the most notorious traffic jams, and bureaucratic red tape. All of this creating a nervous system steeped in stress hormones and a brain with a high threshold for stimulation. You can take the girl out of Manila, but you can't take Manila out of the girl. The brain, body, and heart shaped by the Philippines is the same brain, body, and heart that desires to experience life as more than a mother and wife, and write about it. Writing home allows me to harness the resonance of the familiar in my writing. The universality of home, family, comfort, and love are the foundation that keeps me grounded, my safe harbor after every adventure. Writing far gives me the courage to be different. The thrill of adventure, freedom, and discovery are the space my curious and creative self needs to spread its wings. Writing home enables me to stay true to what makes me feel safe and loved. Writing far enables me to imagine a universe of promise, worlds beyond and selves within that I long to explore. The last slide, please. Ask me how it works, or wie es mir gefällt, über Liebe und nichts inklusives Begehren, are both available outside, is the story of all of these in the container of marriage, motherhood, and migration. A love story that is born in the Philippines but is at home in the world. In closing, I offer everyone the invitation to be curious. There are as many ways to love and be loved, to show commitment, to experience joy, transcendence, pleasure, and growth, as there are books in these halls and stories in this world. In bringing our curiosity to the rules that we've always known, we find the courage to rewrite them. In questioning the truths we have been born into, we find the voice to speak our own. And in imagining a new world, even just 1 degree from what we know now, we find the inspiration to change ours. Maraming salamat. Dankeschön.
Deepa Paul. Stories of love and relationships, stories of strength, distance, stories of homecoming. I think we can see that as Filipino writers, especially for those of us writing abroad, writing afar, we are engaged in our communities, not just back to the Philippines, but in all these communities globally. We are engaged as writers, as artists, with one another and with all of you as well as artists. I would like to open up the floor. We have about 10 minutes for a question and answer. Please raise your hand if you have a question for our panelists. Please keep your question brief so we can hear reaction from our writers on stage, and a microphone will be brought to you. Okay, yes, we have one here.
Deepa, how would you tell your story for a Filipino audience? Would it shift? Would it be different?
It would be exactly the same because it's my story. It has my name on it. It involves my family. So the memoir is true to life. I had the choice whether or not to use a pseudonym, but I believe the power of a story is diminished if I hide. So the book is published in the UK, Commonwealth, the Netherlands, and Germany, but not in the Philippines. Hopefully that will change this weekend. But it is exactly the same story. Whether it has to be repackaged differently is, I guess, a marketing or publishing choice. But I wouldn't change a thing.
Can I? Oh,
Yes, Maya.
yeah, because with your question, how do you tell your story with your family in the Philippines? Actually, well, it's a different plane, of course. I have two daughters. They are now have their own families, but before they got married, they had a live-in situation with their partners. We went to the Philippines, and I told my family, they are living together. They're not married. And my daughters, especially the eldest, how would they react? They said, that's not important. Important is that I stand behind you. I support you, and I don't want to lie to my families. So I tell them what's the truth, but how they will react to that, it's their thing. So my sister, for example, she would introduce my daughter with a partner. She would say, "Oh, that's her husband," and it's her thing. And I do not correct her with that because that's her way of reacting to it. But then, for my part, I told the truth, and I told my children, "It's okay," I hope I want to say I can relate very much also to your answer. Because being abroad, being in another culture, you have to balance this also, But then I always stand for the truth. This is the truth. So I don't make stories because it's easy to handle the truth. There's only one thing. It's just the truth.
Marga, how about for you? You grew up in Manila. You had a long career working abroad in the Middle East as a journalist. Now you're back in Manila. Do you feel like your voice has changed since you've come back to their home country?
Immensely. I think, as with Deepa, I think being abroad is what allowed me to be brave about using it. The book that I wrote, which is an intimate look at Philippine society, and I basically put out on the page everything they do not like you to talk about. It's all there, from the corruption to the politics to the fact that some of our politicians have 8 wives and 88 children. It's all there. It's not hidden. But of course, it's a Catholic country. There's no divorce, but the age of consent up until recently was 12. So it's a country of, it's a paradox of a country. There's so many things that exist simultaneously and people just look away. So Deepa is in an open relationship. She's not the only one. There are many people in the Philippines, but they will not talk about it.
I hope to find them.
Right? They don't talk about it. So same-sex relationships are not acceptable, and yet they are. Because there are politicians who are in same-sex relationships, or there are actors and celebrities and influencers, but it's just not looked at in a way that might be considered acceptable, and yet it is. Because they don't talk about it. So all of that is also what I examine in the book, because it's looking at what exactly is truth anyway. If we're all lying to ourselves, then who are we protecting? And what is it that we're protecting each other from? It's a very strange way to live, but it's also kind of fascinating to look at it in that sense. And that's why in the writing, so much can be exercised. And I didn't know how my book would be taken in the Philippines precisely because of the subject matter. Nobody had been so, depends how you see it, some might say vulgar. Like there are people who will be like, did you really need to put that scene about the priest? You could have just left it to a line. I said, well, it started out not very long, but my editor actually said, why are you hiding it? Tell us more. If your aim is to shock, then shock. And writing it the way I did without any kind of, I tried to keep it as straight to the facts as I could because I wanted the clinicality of it to shock. The fact that you're reading it without emotion and the only emotion you're getting from it is your own response to all of this vulgarity or horridness that is happening that we all know about but no one talks about. So
Let's try to fit in maybe another question. Yes, a gentleman right here.
No, but I think it's a real thing to talk about this when I think in the situation in the Philippines, no. I also think in the time now for me and my father, my grandmother, how poor they live, and have your heart not in blood. When the Philippines live in the low standard, and you are, I think you all sit here have a very high standard, no. But I think there is nothing for change for the most Philippines. Nothing changed. You make books and you write about this, ne? But no talk about this. And I understand the Catholic with the divorce is also a problem what we cannot make here. But I think sometimes when I see the Philippines, I have the girlfriend who was working in Dubai. What hard working this woman every day. They are very working 10 hours every day from Monday to Sunday. I think in many Philippines, a low standard is very sad.
It is. It really is. I mean, it's an educated country, and yet it is being diminished in its probabilities or potential for success, also because corruption is so institutionalized. So you could be of a certain, let's say, economic background. You have the possibility to go to school, but you have to get out of school at a certain stage because your family needs to survive, you need to work just to feed your family as well. That's why there are so many overseas Filipinos. I mean, 10% of the population is working abroad to sustain families back home. And so, like, I am very aware of that. I'm sure everybody here is very aware of that. They still live in Europe, you know, and you see it. You see these harsh realities. But what do you do about it? And you have to try to fight it by either writing about it. It's being talked about on TV. It's in the movies. It's in the TV shows. And like I said, when I say that there might be open marriages and that there is no divorce, this doesn't affect just one strata of society. This is everybody. I mean, if you go to the areas of the country that might be the poorest, there are even less rules in those areas. And everybody says, oh, it's because it's a Catholic country. No, of course not. People don't go to church. You can go to the rural areas, and it's not like the churches are full. So it's been an excuse that's been used too long. What's happened is everybody is so worried about their own daily lives right now that thinking about changing the society as a whole escapes them because they don't have the luxury of that just yet. And so I agree with you. Yes, it is very sad, but slowly, you know, I mean, what else can we do, really?
But what do you think is the role? We've identified these problems. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
Maya.
would just like to add to that it is harsh, it is sad, but I am a Filipino. And actually, I cannot do otherwise. So I have to continue doing things to contribute to make things right until I die. You know, I not because maybe I will see it in 5 years. I will just keep on going because that's something I have to hold on to. And honestly, I am still hopeful. I am still very hopeful that somehow we will reach that's the stage slowly. It will not happen in you know, from one day to another, but it will be a process. And as a Filipino doing things for the Philippines, I see actually those process also growing. And that's my where I hold on to that hope.
Just to add to that, you know, all we can do as writers is write one story at a time. As women writers, we are also writing about earlier, I don't know if you were here for the talk on the optics of gender, where we were wondering, where are all the lesbian stories? Where are the stories of women writing about sexuality and desire? It's very privileged, you know, for 4 men to be on a panel. But this is precisely the reason, because women in the Philippines are still economically dependent on men for survival. These women are not thinking about anything other than survival and the survival of their families. So those of us who have the chance to write will write. Those of us who have the chance to tell the truth and, you know, offer a perspective on, let's say, the hypocrisy of, you know, the institution of marriage in the Philippines, or how we are taught to disown our bodies as a, for me, for example, as a young Catholic schoolgirl, or the plight of mothers in different contexts. I mean, all we can do is keep writing for the women who can't until the stories get to them and get to other people who will understand what it is like to be a woman in the Philippines, having grown up there, now having that little bit of space, that little bit of room and energy and time to put these stories down.
Any other questions for our panelists? Yes, I see one right here in the center.
I personally believe that change also comes by speaking about visions of a different future, and I'm very impressed with your courage of doing so. And I'm curious, how are the consequences in the Philippines for speaking your truth or for thinking differently? And how is it when you live abroad and you think and speak differently and want to shape the culture in the Philippines by that?
Well, when I was in the Philippines, I was very silent. I was a good girl. I like to say I'm a recovering good girl and recovering people pleaser. There's a very strong social control of everyone must do the same thing. I always knew that my perspectives on love and intimacy and relationships were very different, but I kept them to myself. And moving to the Netherlands, I found a place where I could be more of an individual and explore these beliefs. Now, writing about these things far from home, I just had a few articles come out in GMA News Online in the Philippines, where I used to work, over the last few days, and the comments are really something. But far from home, it is, these comments cannot touch me and my life. I still get to go home to my life, which I love. When I shut my laptop or I close my phone, criticism disappears. And I have only my real life and my writing. So it's easier to be insulated from criticism online when you have built kind of this home and this life, that makes space for who you are. Anyone else?
Yeah. For me, it's maybe different. I'm always, as a young girl, a girl who always, my father would call me, "You're a rebel," Well,
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, because I became activist when I went to college. I always spoke the truth, and I even quarreled with my father. We made up, by the way. So, and even with my aunts, because I didn't want to do something which is not right. And we still made up, because finally they accepted it. So I stood my ground, and I continue to do that. In the previous session, I said I was part of the underground movement, and I left it, and I thought that part is closed. But then I see things not going right. So actually, I decided together with my husband to come out with the truth about it. Because I am motivated by that, that moral compassion to do what is right. It's not morality, but the moral compassion to do what is right. I speak the truth. I am harsh, but I do it with love. Not to condemn people, but to learn from that part of our life, of our history. And I hope I'm able, in my writing, to convey saying the truth, as how hard it may be, but doing it with love. So what Deepa said, no judgment, that is doing it with love, actually. Yeah.
I think we maybe have time for one more question. Yes. If anybody would like to ask our panelists a question or have a brief comment. Yes, there's a hand in the back.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't been here for a long time, but I don't know if I repeat the question, but I would be interested in hearing from you how daily corruption looks like. Maybe you can give us an example or a few examples of that.
I believe the question was about the corruption, how daily corruption is, how we experience it as writers or as Filipinos.
I covered the Philippines as well for Al Jazeera for many years, and there are only so many ways I could report on corruption for TV. Because most every story was touched by corruption that came out of the Philippines, and that was just the truth. And I think that's why I needed to, after I left Al Jazeera, to sit down and give myself time to write a book about everything that was the truth, that you cannot put in a 2-minute report on TV. So it ended up being in 500 pages of fiction, if you know what I mean. So it still had to come out. It was almost like I needed to do some post-traumatic stress, you know what I mean, therapy. And it was by writing it out. I had to do it. Because it is there. You cannot deny it. And it is part of the way of life. You almost expect it. You cannot almost walk out the door without expecting to need to bribe someone for something. You can't even go to, let's say, get your driver's license without needing to slip someone a little bit of money if you want to get your license on time, because if not, you might have to wait a year. Like, it's simple things, but it's just so ingrained that people expect it and demand it. So it's a bit of a dysfunction that is now, it's being looked at, it's being investigated again. I mean, this happens in cycles, and it's happened over and over and over again. I don't know how many dictators, shall we say, or authoritarian leaders have been exiled from the Philippines because of one manner of corruption or another. And yet, here we are again, you know, with the second Marcos presidency. I'm not saying that he is corrupt, but again, they are investigating corrupt practices that are a daily life for many Filipinos. And what's to happen with that? Who knows? Because next election cycle, they're going to forget all about it and probably re-elect the person who was kicked out the last time. And so it's all of these cycles until they're broken. The country's going to keep itself shackled, is my belief.
It's very hard to think of just one example. But I've lived in the Netherlands now for 13 years. And when I do something like register my business online as an entrepreneur, that I can do it online in 15 minutes. You know, I can pay my taxes online. Well, I'm terrible at numbers, so it takes me a while. But actually filing the thing is just a simple, 2-step click. In the Philippines, I try to describe to my, Dutch peers, you cannot imagine what it is like to try to file taxes in the Philippines as an entrepreneur. And the systems are intentionally, I believe, kept laborious and confusing, so that at some point you just want to there will be an angel who will approach you with an easier way to do things for a certain amount of money. And at some point, maybe, when I became a parent, that I just wanted like this convenience because I was so tired, I would tell my babysitter, take my money. Most Filipinos live at that point to make things easier for themselves, in a system that is actively fighting against them flourishing, doing well, making a living. You just want to tell someone, please make it easier for me. And there's no other way. The driving license example really comes to mind. I learned how to drive in the Philippines, and to get my driver's license was also a series of people asking for money. And now I've had to relearn how to drive in the Netherlands, and I've failed the driving test 4 times. But I will keep doing it until I get it. And I'm incredibly frustrated at myself. I'm trying to relearn how to drive in the Netherlands in a foreign language at the age of 43. But I'm kind of thankful that there's no one giving me an easy way out in exchange for money.
There's been a couple comments relating to corruption, right? And corruption at its base level has to do with how we relate to each other, our affinity to each other. We have a concept in Philippine culture that's kapwa. Kapwa means our relationship to each other, our connection to each other. And part of combating those kind of things are these kinds of gatherings, this kind of writing, storytelling, building kapwa with one another. So on that, I think we will conclude our panel this afternoon. Thank you so much for being part of it and joining us. Our panelists were Marga Ortigas, Deepa Paul, and Maya Butalid. A round of applause for our panelists and writers, please. And thanks to all of you for joining us.